am Claire Olekshak, the Executive Director of Sustain Dane. Welcome to the October Sustainable Breakfast Series, Wellness and the Built Environment. We're really excited to have you here. As I mentioned, please do introduce yourself in the chat. Throughout the panel, that's a great way to still be asking questions and communicate with each other as we are enjoying the presentation. We had a networking session ahead of this meeting, which went really well. And after this is done, we'll also have 30 minutes of networking afterwards. I'll add the link to the chat when we get to the end of the program. So I hope some of you can join us for that. It's a nice way to talk with some more people one-on-one. Our program today is a panel of wonderful local architects, engineers, and facility managers. We're going to be exploring how the built environment can better prioritize health, equity, accessibility as we respond to COVID and a rapidly changing world. I'm going to share my screen here to recognize our program and organization sponsors. So I would like to thank our program partners and our supporting top level members. Also, thank you to, next slide. Also, thank you to all of our partners and the network. It's really all of us together that makes this work possible, so thank you. Since we last met in July, we have some new members that have joined us. So thank you to our new members, Allegra, Destination Madison, Hoffman Manufacturing Corp, Miron Construction, Reality for Good, St. John's Lutheran Church, and the Village of McFarland. We are almost at the end of the year, which means we are almost at the Sustain Dane Summit. So please mark your calendar for December 3rd. We have a fantastic summit coming together. Crystal Chazelle, who is Vice President of Operations and Engagement at Project Drawdown, the world's leading resource for climate solutions, will give a keynote. And then we also will have a panel of local leaders talking on how we're going to be delivering in our community on climate, health, and equity. We'll have Robin Lazowski from Slipstream Moderate, Tori Miller, executive chef and co-owner of a number of restaurants, James Edward Mills of the Joy Trip Project, Lisa Payton Care from Black Women's Wellness Center, and Justice Castaneda from Commonwealth Development. The prep meetings have been so enlightening, and I can't wait for everyone to participate. We also will be having breakout sessions focused on the participants from our Accelerate Sustainability Workshop and the Live Forward awardees for 2020. There will be time for networking as well during the summit, and we will also be able to have reflection and connection as best we can. We've been really thoughtful to try to spread the sessions throughout the day so that participants can balance participating as well as other professional and personal obligations you have. So we look forward to you being there for all of the day, for a part of the day, and with registration will also come links to all of the programs afterwards if there is something that you won't be able to fit into your schedule. So before we head right into the program, I would like to ask Steve Whalen to say a couple words. Steve is from DC Engineering, and he's a vice chair of our board of directors. And this program is something he's been really passionate about this whole year as we've been planning what we wanted to do. And Steve, I wanted to just ask you kind of about this topic today. And could you share a little bit about how you value the contribution of engineers and architects and facility managers to make buildings healthy places and a place of wellness from your perspective and DC Engineering's perspective?
Yes, thank you, Claire, for the opportunity to talk today and the opportunity to kick off this great session. So I've been working in the engineering field as a design engineer for the past 20-some years, and about 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to take the test to become a lead accredited professional and get involved with an organization called Wisconsin Green Building Alliance. So, and why that was so important to me was a couple of things. One was it gave me an opportunity to work collaboratively with other professionals in the field. So architects, landscape architects, all the different engineering fields, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, the site civil engineer like myself, and then the contractors, and most importantly, the owners of buildings and the facility managers, the people that made these commercial buildings places of work, places, multifamily facilities, places to live, places to play, a good place to be. So, we talk about sustainability being in the three-legged stool, people, planet, and prosperity. But this is really the people side. And when we, as design professionals, are able to find ways to make work, live, and play spaces healthy and happy places to be, it's just so fulfilling as a professional. So this kind of work and the work that I do with other architects and other engineers and other contractors is probably one of the most fulfilling parts of our jobs, I will say, creating spaces that are healthy and happy. And with COVID right now, this is even more important to all of us, as we know. So I'm so glad we have the opportunity to talk with some real experts today, and a great group of people as well, to just delve into this discussion and see what we can do better, and see how we work through this time in history that we have an opportunity to do a bit better. So thanks, Claire. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Steve. And that is a great segue. We're now going to turn to our panel. We have Lana Zoet, who's going to be moderating. As we transition to the panel, I'm going to ask Lorenzo to put a quick poll up to give you guys a little fun fact. I'm going to also answer it, but I do know the answer, so it might skew things a little bit. So thank you for being here. And Lana, you want to answer that poll and then take it away?
Sure, I'll give everyone a second to put in their answers to the quiz question there. Can we see the results anywhere, Claire?
You can just share the results for what the right answer is.
Oh, okay.
I can share them too. I'll end the poll. We've got most people responded.
Nice work, everyone. Yeah, so the correct answer is 90%. We spend 90% of our time indoors, which is kind of amazing to remind ourselves of how important the quality of our indoor space really is. So, as many of us here recognize, sustainability is not just an issue of resource conservation, but an issue of human and environmental rights. It is an issue of the rights of our future generations to a verdant and equitable life. So when considering the built environment specifically, every building that is created has an inherent toll on our resources, and every environment we create has a positive or negative impact on the health and well-being of the people who spend their time within it or interact with it in their communities. So as designers, engineers, and facilities professionals, we have a deep responsibility as stewards of our built environment to humanity. So I'd like to ask the panel here, if you all don't mind turning your cameras on and getting ready to jump in. What do you personally feel is the biggest opportunity for how buildings can contribute to wellness for the environment and people? And to those viewing, please feel free to add your sentence answer in the comments. Bill, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Fadoon, Director of Facilities at CUNA Mutual Group. Based on our poll, obviously, we all spend a lot of time indoors, and the buildings we inhabit use such a large portion of the amount of resources we consume. If you think about our opportunity to limit toxic materials we install or the amount of energy we use, that there are huge benefits to the environment and our people. I recently heard an interesting analogy that sustainability is like a Rubik's Cube. So if you focus on just one side of the cube and you get all the colors right, you're obviously, the other sides are going to be a jumbled mess. And I think sustainability is no different. We have to focus on the whole to really be able to make an impact and not lose sight of all the aspects that contribute.
That's a great analogy. Thank you. Laura.
Good morning. My name is Laura LaMere, and I'm the Environmental Services Manager here at Ho Chang Gaming Madison. The benefits of nature to mental health, I think, is significant. And so I think finding ways of bringing the outdoors inside is a great way of contributing to overall wellness.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Chitani?
Morning all, my name is Chitani Ndisale. I'm an architect and a project manager with BWBR. And I think I have a two-part answer to that question. As architects, I think we tend to think of the technical performance aspect of how buildings come together, but I actually personally feel buildings are about people. And I feel the biggest opportunity to really affect the environment is how you engage people, how you gather critical mass in thinking, and how you integrate everybody's levels of expertise to create a holistic, cohesive unit that utilizes resources at a higher level. And the exciting things that we're seeing in industry right now is that sustainability is taking on a much more holistic approach.
Great, thank you. Russ.
Hi, thanks, Lana. Hi, my panelists. Nice to be here with you. Russell Knudson, mechanical engineer at Strang Architects and Engineers here in Madison. I'm in Madison. I have a virtual background though because I'm actually in my basement. But anyway, wellness and the environment is important to me, and I know that there's some great discussion that's going to happen about indoor wellness, but for me, I'm an energy engineer, and the reason energy and wellness is so important to me is because every bit of energy we consume, it's actually, it's impacting our overall environmental wellness outside. WHO last year released that they predict that 1 in 8 premature deaths happen due to air pollution, and so that's just kind of one factor that kind of drives me in my career, my pursuit.
Wow. Well, I feel like we've heard a lot about how complex of an issue it is, right? It's about relationships with ourselves and our environments, and it's not a single faceted issue, right? Sustainability is a very deep and complex issue, but the benefits to people are immeasurable if these things are considered correctly. So next, let's talk about third-party certification. So there are certifications and frameworks to measure sustainability and also to provide some best practice guidance that now that are existing that kind of go beyond just energy performance, like the earlier versions of LEED kind of focused on, to include health and wellness. And some of these frameworks include WELL, the Living Building Challenge, the AIA Framework for Design Excellence, and FitWell, among others. And so what are some of the metrics or measures of success that these frameworks consider? And what are some of the advantages of these frameworks that you have witnessed to a building project or to the people within that space? Chitani, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, I think I'll speak about WELL. WELL is a third-party certification standard that came on the scene in 2014. And prior to the introduction of WELL in the industry, I think I mentioned earlier, performance design was really focused more on systems. And Russ, please, I'm not putting what you do down. It's equally important. But there was a need in the industry to start to focus more on the people-centric aspects of sustainability. And WELL really came about. It was introduced by the International Well Building Institute, and came about with the notion that we spend most of our time in the built environment. And in fact, the CDC has a study that states that the biggest determinant of your physical health is your physical environment and your social environment, even bigger than lifestyle and behaviors. So WELL wanted a sort of a third-party credentialed or certified standard where we could really have a measurable set of, and in WELL they call them features. The initial version, without getting into too much detail, had 7 features that touched on air and water, even went down to nourishment. The most current version focuses on 10 features. But it's really a holistic look at how the built environment can impact physiological elements of the person, and how we need to respond to that environment to sort of enhance wellness. So.
It's a great summary. Thank you, Chitani. Yeah. So Bill, as a person thinking about people within a space every day as part of your job, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we're currently building a new space on our campus right now, anticipated to be LEED Silver, but we're also looking at the Fitwel certification that you mentioned and a newer certification called Park Smart. So as we talked about, LEED focuses more on the building itself, things like reducing water use by installing low flow plumbing fixtures, things like that. But Fitwel is more concerned about the people who are in the space, which is more akin to well, like Chitani was talking about. And it advocates for things like stair usage as opposed to elevator use to really try to help the inhabitants of the building. Park Smart is something that helps our operations team focus on better sustainable practices for ongoing maintenance of our parking garage. For example, how we might clean it once or twice a year, something like that. As we reached out to our employees about certifications, we resoundingly heard that people wanted us to focus on certifications that actually helped them and the environment as opposed to just getting a certification to certify. And so that's something that we took a real hard look at to be thoughtful about what would have the most impact in terms of dollars spent versus return on our well-being and environment, which was more important to everyone.
That's a great thought. Meaningful impact, not just some meaningless words, right?
Right.
Russ, what are your thoughts here?
I guess for green building certifications in general, the well, LEED, Fitwel. I mean, we try to remind folks that they're an excellent marketing tool. It helps a building owner market to their external clients about what their value set are and what their commitments are to kind of the community. But it's also an internal marketing tool to your internal clients, which are your people. You're trying to retain your talent. You're trying to have the best folks working in your office. And so certifications like Chitani, I'm glad you spoke about it and brought it up. We're Strang here in Madison is actually we're on the cusp of trying to gain a well certification. We've had our test, which was done by a third party, and so we are just waiting for the results of that. I think I think green building certifications like this, they're independent, third party, they're objective. Whereas some of the great stuff like that Bill mentioned, I mean, the other aspect of kind of having a green building would be reaching out to your people and developing your own value set and saying what's important to us. So you don't need a green building certification. It's helpful. It's independent and objective, but you can have your own principles as well.
That's great. Laura, do you have thoughts to add?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Yeah, so I think that when it comes to living building, the idea is to kind of reconnect to the environment and while eliminating environmental impacts in order to adapt to ever-changing, conditions. And adapting is part of being resilient. Living building encompasses the human need to connect to their environment, and designing buildings that supports this is important. For example, our hope for the Heritage Center that Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison has planned is to become the Ho-Chunk Nation's first living building. It's meant not only to celebrate and educate the community on our culture, but to highlight the importance of sustainability into our building structures, because we know how important it is to have a sustainable community, which means, inclusion, equity, compassion, etc. It's a part of who the Ho-Chunk people are and have always been.
That's wonderful. So kind of the takeaway from this question. Oh, sorry. Do you want to jump in, Chitani?
Yeah, just one last thought. Laura, I really appreciate your comment. And I think one encouraging trend that we're seeing in the industry right now was, whereas as before, when we received requests for qualifications or requests for proposals from clients, the focus would be, requiring having a lead AP on the project, for instance, even though they might not be going all the way through to third-party certification. But the trend we're now noticing is that there are more requests for well AP. So even the clients are getting themselves really educated, and they really care about these issues. So that's nice to see in the industry, and it's been confirmed by Laura.
Right. So it sounds like the certifications can be a great tool to teach us about some strategies and to help hold projects accountable for some of these goals, but it's the most meaningful when there's an alignment with the values of the people that are just that the space is being designed for, so that you know that'll give you the most impact. So what are some examples from each of you of how COVID has impacted a design project that you're working on, or how you're operating a facility? So how are you ensuring health and wellness is a priority at this time when it's so important? Laura, do you want to start us out?
Sure. So when it comes to operations, COVID has obviously completely changed how we do everything here. Speaking specifically to my responsibilities, I've implemented new cleaning procedures along with incorporating new products that have been approved by the EPA as effective against the virus. We've taken all necessary safety precautions to protect our guests and employees alike, including proper PPE, plexiglass, etc. Air quality is also a very important factor in that, and many casinos have now gone smoke-free due to COVID. That is not something that we had to do here at Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison because we have already been 100% smoke-free since 2015. So we didn't need to take that additional step since it already was a part of our work toward eliminating indoor environmental impacts. In addition to that, though, it is very stressful times right now. So. And many people are struggling with their mental health. So I think that is something that we need to keep in mind as well. Just letting your employees know that you're there and that you care, that you're there for them, having more flexibility with their schedules, just being more empathetic to people's situations. In fact, I'm about to collaborate with a colleague to implement a wellness program here that will focus on addressing the stresses that people are going through right now in hopes to avoid employee burnout.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Bill.
Yeah, just like Laura, one of the first things that we did was start thinking about air filtration. And so we changed all of our filters from MERV 11 to MERV 13s just to try to create that extra filtration in our systems. Beyond that, we've been thinking about our new building on campus and what's going to be, what spaces are going to be most important in that building, thinking about what's going to bring people back to work in the future. And I personally see a greater emphasis on collaboration space. I think a lot of people are going to have that hybrid model as we move forward, where they'll work from home a couple days a week and then in the office a couple days a week. And so if someone's coming to the office, they're going to be there to build relationships and collaborate face to face. So our new building is being designed with as much flexibility as we can in mind. And so we can open and close rooms to change the sizing. I think a room that may originally have been planned for 25 people might only be able to be used by 10 in the future if there's not a vaccine or something like that. But we're really trying to set ourselves up in a way that allows us to utilize that building to its utmost. It just might look different than the way we had originally thought. We also looked at opportunities for other ways that we can impact any of these residual thoughts that kind of and lessons from COVID. For example, we're not going to install drinking fountains in our new building. We'll have bottle fillers only because nobody wants to put their mouth up to a drinking fountain pre-COVID and especially post-COVID. So we're continuing to learn into this, and I hope that we can keep making changes as we move forward in the future.
That's great. I think it's called a bubbler here in Wisconsin.
Oh,
Bill.
yes.
Okay, Russ, this is your moment to geek out a little bit.
Well, I want to say, I'm going to go ahead and go out there and say I was in a building the other day for a survey, and I needed a drink of water, and they had the bubblers covered up with a locked cover. I tried to drink out of the bottle filler, everybody, with just
Oh,
with
no.
my, and you know, It worked okay, but I gotta say we do need to think about folks that don't have a bottle like myself in that situation.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, everybody knew the COVID topic was going to come up. I would say, you know, obviously, building owners like Bill or some of our clients have reached out to us. Yeah, everybody wants to know what are the solutions to think about to keep their staff safe, bring people back into the office. I would say that there have been subtle changes to new buildings that are being built. I would say that the you know, the design of buildings from our perspective hasn't changed wholesale because of what's going on, but some subtle changes that we've been recommending. Bill mentioned the filtration. Laura mentioned PPE, absolutely. From a mechanical engineering perspective, the way I would summarize it is we try to think about this viral pandemic as, you know, there's really three main modes of transmission. There's transmission through the air, which we all have heard much about, and there's transmission through surfaces, which mechanical engineers don't deal with very much. But anyway, in the air, there's disinfection, filtration, as well as just more ventilation to reduce the amount of virus and reduce the concentration of the virus. And so we look at more fresh air in buildings. We look at added filtration if the systems can handle it. And we have helped look at some disinfection strategies in the air, such as a ultraviolet light. So anyway, that's what's on my mind about that topic.
Great strategies. Chitani, what have you seen from your clients? You're muted.
This is a really interesting topic for me. So I'll try to provide a multifaceted answer and then try to be quick about it. The first aspect of this is the way in which architects are providing service delivery. Architecture is a highly collaborative practice. You want to be in front of the client, you want to be in front of the stakeholders. Now we've been forced to sort of virtualize, so that's shifted the modes in which we work. But there are also other aspects to this. I'm not going to talk. I'm with BWBR. I have colleagues that are much smarter than I am as far as workplace. But there's at BWBR. There's been a lot of activity and engagement on how workplace needs to change to address COVID. Just, you know, studying standards that would typically apply to collaborative workspaces. How do you design conference spaces? There's been a very detailed thinking going on. I want to focus more, so this is my third comment, on my area of expertise. I'm focused more in science and technology. I design labs. And what I'm seeing in my industry is, and this is, it's interesting in this because it's two-sided. Labs are traditionally very clean environments. We're typically designed to a higher number of air changes per hour. So traditionally, labs have sort of already been designed to sort of deal with an issue like this type of pandemic. But maybe some of the strategies that we might start to take is if you consider a lab module, typically a lab module might have 2 researchers working, you might reduce that to 1. But the environment itself is already sort of relatively clean. We already use high performance filters, as Bill was talking about. The big impact that I'm seeing is, and this is related to the AI framework for design excellence, one of the measures is design for change. Is the way in which our end user clients have shifted their research operations to directly focus on attacking this pandemic. And that's just been really, really impressive. And these are really intelligent people that are already working on big problems, right? They're trying to find the next therapeutic that might have a huge impact on cancer. But being able to really, really quickly shift their focus to really start to do research on therapeutics that can address COVID and vaccines as well, that's been really impressive. So, sorry, long-winded answer.
Oh, that's great. And it sounds like there's a definite theme of resilience, both adapting to what's happening right now, learning from those adaptations, what's going to stick because it's just a better practice going forward, but also the recognition that, you know, that there could be additional waves of this pandemic, there could be other pandemics, there could be other situations that we have yet to predict. So recognizing what the most valuable function space can provide is, as Bill kind of noted, you know, why would people come to the office, right? It's oftentimes going to be to collaborate with each other, or as Chitani noted, for specialty spaces such as laboratories. So designing spaces which really allow for those kind of highest uses of in-person collaboration, and also just knowing that we have to consider spaces to adapt to the unknowns that could emerge going forward. So now let's talk about what role that building codes and mandates play on healthy buildings. So for example, Governor Evers' Executive Order 38 charges that all energy consumed in Wisconsin is to be 100% carbon free by the year 2050. And so that a subset of that order was the impetus for the creation of the state's new sustainability guidelines for building projects, which ensure carbon reduction by the buildings themselves, but also reduce embodied carbon within building materials and so on. And those guidelines are based on the AIA Framework for Design Excellence, which is formerly the COAT Top 10 for those of you who are familiar, and encompass resource use as well as measures of equity and wellness. So thinking about that example, but there are many others, what type of impact, positive or negative, do regulations and building codes such as this have on the built environment? Chitani, do you want to start out?
Yes, I can start. I can start out. As again, it's a double-edged sword. I think design professionals could tell you that there's some level of frustration with building codes. For instance, the issue of ventilation. I just mentioned earlier that labs are typically designed to a higher number of air changes per hour, but that also means that labs are some of the worst offenders when it comes to energy consumption. So these codes can do play a role as far as safety in the built environment. There has been some level of frustration with rigidity. When you're dealing with safety, it's very difficult to be flexible. But at the same time, codes can play a key role in shifting an industry to higher levels of performance. For instance, the new sustainability guidelines will be mandating that we design buildings to ISHE 90.1 2016, whereas most states still, when you consider energy codes, they're designing to IECC 2015 plus ISHE 90.1 2007 or maybe 2013. And I know that the Department of Energy, working with the Pacific Northwest National Labs, did a study that demonstrated that the jump from ASHRAE 90.1 2007 to 2013 represented a 30 to 35% reduction in energy consumption on average. So that's a big improvement. And the state is now requiring us to really design to ASHRAE 90.1 2016 as a minimum. So that I think that's a great that's a great initiative, and it's going to give us a lot of infrastructure that it is designed at high performance levels.
My background is I'm an architect by training, and I used to practice in California, and we had Title 24. And an example from Title 24 is energy efficient lighting in all of our office buildings. And so there were aspects related to all LED lighting, daylight harvesting. If your project was over a certain size, you had to meet these requirements. And, you know, at first, when Title 24 was enacted, the requirements were huge and expensive barriers for our clients. I mean, obviously they ate up a lot of budget, and budgets only go so far in a project. But I think the impact that it had was monumental. Like Chitani was saying, it's really important to have those mandates there, because otherwise, if you're just relying on people to do the right thing, as I said, your budget only goes so far, right? You have to have a trade-off. But when you have a building code or legislation, I think it really helps to move the needle.
That's great. Russ.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and just say I think your initial question was what does the impact building codes make, and I think everybody's here agreeing that yes, building codes absolutely have a role. You know, the way I look at the building codes as being a design professional is that it's a code compliant building is barely legal, right? And so you know, obviously, to echo what Bill just said, organizations having their own clear set of values, clear goals as an organization, and working with their design consultant to help create a space that achieves those goals, and then trying to align their physical environment with their otherwise outward goals. You know, I think that's going to make much more headway, and we can't hold our breath for codes to change. Although, as Chitani pointed out, we have great leadership. We happen to live in a great area with a lot of leadership that is pushing us. We've got the state now asking more of their own buildings than they are asking everybody else to follow. We have City of Madison making great strides to be leaders in the way that they are operating and designing their buildings. And so, you know, I guess long way of saying codes are important, but I think we need to, we can't wait around for codes to drive us.
And if I can, one last comment I have, I'm sorry, Lana, is that the new guidelines do mandate energy use intensity, EUI, except for lab buildings. So that's a little disappointing for me, from my perspective. We would like to see that EUI. It's tough. It's a little tough for labs, but it would be good to sort of have some kind of baseline to work to as well. So
it's a wide range, right?
It is.
It's a wide range of what's existing.
Yep.
And actually, Chitani, could you talk a little bit about how codes might also impact the type of strategies we used? You had spoken before about in Canada, the emphasis is more on hydronics, for example.
Sorry if I'm over speaking, but this is, I think, an important point. Sometimes we might think that because we have to be specific to the environment that we're in. And if you think about designing for the Southwest, or if you think about designing for maybe Minnesota, you might start to hear comments that, well, some of these performance standards are not appropriate for our climate. But with some recent experience in Canada, what I learned really quickly is that it could also be an industry and systems-based thing, because Canada, as you can imagine, is ASHRAE zone. I believe the southern part is 7A, and it starts to go up to 7B and 8. These are really, really cold environments where you might need an engine block for your car, for instance. But they're still, because they adopt more hydronic type systems, radiant heating systems, less air side systems, they can, based on their code, MNECB, they can really design high performance buildings that achieve amazing EUIs. So there's something to learn there as well.
That's great. Design teams can innovate, but also learn from what's going on in the rest of the world or in similar climate zones and adapt some of those strategies. Laura, do you have anything to add here?
Sure. Kind of in addition to what Russ said, I think a lot of it is definitely not waiting around, like self-accountabilities, because guidelines really set the bare minimum of what an organization should do. The Ho-Chunk Nation has a bill called the Rights of Nature that I think kind of coincides with Governor Evers' Executive Order 38. So we're working on it right now to amend it into our Constitution. And this constitutional amendment puts the primary duty of protecting nature on the government. And it focuses on the well-being of not just people, but the overall ecosystems and their inalienable right to exist and to thrive. So I think when you have these types of regulations in place, it does necessitate an organization to focus on the practices, and it does help hold them accountable.
That's great. Thank you so much. So next, let's talk about, here's a big topic here. We are facing unprecedented times for this generation with the combined impact of a pandemic and social unrest as a result of the history of systemic racism and oppression in the United States. And the result on design environments can be a revisitation and re-envisioning toward a better, more equitable future. And so how do you foresee communities changing to incorporate equity in health and design justice going forward? Bill, do you want to start us out? Sorry about my kids screaming there. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Bill, go
no
ahead.
problem. I'm really happy you sent this question ahead of time because it is a really heavy question and takes some forethought. From my perspective, I think we're going to see a much greater emphasis on being mindful of inclusion and who we're designing for. You know, as designers, a lot of time we're told to design for the 95th percentile and you'll be good to go. And while that's true, you're still leaving out a large percentage of people who are all contributing to the success of your space. In our new building, we're taking a lot of steps to try to think broader about who we're designing for. You know, I talked earlier in Fitwell about the stairs and stair usage and trying to increase usage there, but we're also being really mindful about adding an upgraded design aesthetic in our elevators because not everyone can take the stairs. And so we don't want to leave out anyone who isn't able to take the stairs. We're also installing a foot washing bath in one of our personal rooms to support that need during prayer practice. And so even though it sounds like those are really small steps, I think that those types of things are going to become a lot more mainstream as we think about inclusive design and who we're leaving out of the equation.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And Laura, I feel like your answer to the last question actually ties really nicely to this question as well. Did you have anything additional to add here?
I always have to remember to hit unmute. Yeah, so I think it is important to encourage, inclusivity and encourage broader community engagement. The pandemic and social unrest that we've, experienced recently has really put a spotlight on inequities that many communities have. And the Ho-Chunk are very resilient people, so we know a thing or two about systemic racism and oppression, because we have faced many barriers to get where we are now. So I think, we do know the significance of having a sense of acceptance and connection, and the importance of what that can have, especially to underrepresented communities. So I think it takes, everyone's effort, from big business to small, people from all communities actually getting in and working together to resolving these issues that benefit the entire community, not just to fragment and not just issues that will directly impact them. So when there is nobody in a community that is struggling, that is when you have equity.
Thank you.
Well said, Laura. If I could just jump in, I'm gonna keep playing the energy card because that's what I typically deal with on a day-to-day. But I would just want to remind folks that disproportionately lower-income communities of color are located nearer major power generation and which has air pollution, air emissions. And so as we are reducing our overall energy footprint and we are saving energy, we are helping to provide that environmental justice component to what a lot of the current discussions are about. And so that's one thing to keep in mind as we're developing some new strategies.
Yeah, design for equitable communities, I'm actually glad to say that is one of the 10 measures that's in the AIA framework for design excellence. And I'll just try to provide an example. When you get the confluence of an organization as the AIA beginning to include this in topic in holistic design, and then you combine that with state directives like the new sustainability guidelines that adopt those, the framework for design excellence, it's a very powerful tool. And one example I can provide in how it can work to impact change is maybe in some of the work we do with campuses, some of the academic work. And we're lucky to say that these are very smart clients that push us when we talk about holistic design, to the point that they're pushing us beyond just focusing on performance or even just focusing on wellness, and starting to ask us questions about how they can make their buildings more impactful in the community. So examples would be talking about designing spaces for public forums. And these are teaching institutions, these are research institutions that are acknowledging that they need to have a wider impact in their community, and they need to start to draw people in, especially youth, so that they can expose them to STEM programs and make their environments a little bit more welcoming. So that's a really wonderful trend to see in the industry.
That's great. Yeah, and thinking about that, the impact of educational spaces, you know, getting that talent pipeline, the diverse talent pipeline, really interested in being engaged in that environment. And then also those strategies to ensure persistence so that graduation rates are more representative of our communities, not just a certain, you know, subset of the population. So strategies to make the spaces themselves where people are getting their education feel inclusive and feel like everyone feels like they belong there and they have a big part, that they're individually important and have a role in that space, is really so important to making sure that they stick with their education and persist and are successful in that endeavor. So it's a great point, Chitani. Okay, so we are on our last question now, and following that we will have a Q&A. So this one, if you could all just, if you would like to share some tips for having greater wellness, either in your office or home or buildings, or just tips in general to kind of have an impact, if we can all just go around and share a thought or two. Laura, do you want to start?
Sure. I really want to just say that I think this is very important, especially right now, that it's okay to not be okay. We are just in, you know, living in such stressful times right now that it's people, I think, you know, try to close themselves off and bottle themselves up, and because they think that no one else is, you know, going through these struggles that they are, but everyone is right now. Everyone is under stress, and you know, sometimes we need to operate inside of our emotions instead of trying to avoid them, because you know, when we do that, we avoid the toxicity of suppressed emotions. So I think trying to avoid these feelings can lead us to make decisions out of fear instead of honest consideration.
I want to jump in there too and just say I completely agree with what Laura is saying, and I think it's really important to check in on your employees and colleagues, especially people who may not have family or roommates or something, and if they're working from home, they might feel a little bit isolated. And it's okay to ask people how they're doing and genuinely have a conversation about it, even though it may not be work. It's really important right now to make sure that we're doing those check-ins with people and letting people know that you're there for them.
Those are really nice. I think what keeps me going a little more, feeling more stable is to try to maintain a positive vision for what you're trying to achieve, rather than focusing on the negative. Maybe, I don't know, Laura, maybe I'm not paying enough attention to my emotions when I do that, but you know, I think for me, sharing that vision so that you're working on something together with others and you're working toward a positive goal is one thing I have to remind myself often to do.
Yes, I think I think we're social beings. Working collaboratively is key, and I know that our current environment makes that much harder. But I think just having, as Russ said, having a shared goal and working collaboratively, and also having spaces to be able to take breaks, sort of unplug. When we think about work-life balance, I think we tend to maybe think about it simplistically. This is my work time, and I'm plugged in for 8 hours or 9 hours or 10, depending on how long people work, and then this is my home time. But sometimes I think research has demonstrated that it's better to have more frequent breaks throughout the workday, and that you perform a little bit better. And then we do that at BWBR. We have 15-minute breaks where we can kind of gather and socialize for a little bit and connect, and then get back to work. So
That's great. And I'll just add my thought here too, in that for new projects, whether it be a home renovation, a large building project, the spaces within your own home. Just be your own advocate for what you expect. I mean, this is more of a large scale, but there are so many capable people like those on this call that are, you know, willing to innovate towards good and more equitable and more sustainable solutions. But, you know, if you're on a client side, or if you're having a project done, or like I said, even if you're doing a project in your own home, at the very beginning, think about what you hope to achieve in terms of sustainability and wellness, and just kind of carry those values through, because really well performing buildings and really great solutions don't necessarily happen accidentally. So hold those values close. So thank you so much, everyone. This is such a wonderful group, and I think Claire's going to jump in now so we can go into Q&A.
Great, thank you all so much. And thank you, Lana, for moderating a great panel. We have some good questions in the Q&A, and I've seen some in the chat. I'll try to go back and forth. As new questions come up, try to put them in the Q&A. So the first one is a question about existing buildings, right? There's a lot of inspiration in our newer buildings, and they can really point the way, but most people are living in existing buildings right now. So what are your thoughts in terms of retrofitting them? You know, the cost that it can be to do cutting edge retrofits. And there was kind of a second question in here too about how the benefits to doing this, these retrofits are actually a community-wide benefit. So, you know, is there any thinking around how maybe the community can actually support the cost, or insurance companies or healthcare companies in retrofitting existing buildings?
I'll jump.
Oh, go ahead,
I
Bill.
was just going to jump in first and say, I think for a building owner with existing buildings on a campus, it's really important to try to prove that ROI to upper management and show them, you know, yes, we own this building, so the payoff period can be a little bit longer than if we were leasing. But even in our lease spaces, I think it's important to run that ROI and see what type of investments you can make that really will pay off in the long run. I think that's the easiest way to get things through.
Yeah, that's a nice answer. I would also say there are certainly socialized programs that are trying to incentivize and help folks do the right thing. Focus on Energy being a huge example. When I moved to this state 3 years ago, I was so impressed that we have this program, and I was working in Southern United States, and I can tell you that the Focus on Energy program here is a leader nationally in terms of the way it's implemented. And so I just suggest that as one option, an idea.
Lana, anything you'd like to add there?
I think they covered it pretty well. I'll try not to pile on.
All right. So Kathy was wondering that someone in this group mentioned the energy use intensity. And is this the metric that most of you are using when you're looking at facilities? Dade County is using this metric to recognize energy efficient buildings too.
Yeah, I could say most clients that we work with, it's a great metric. It's a way to compare buildings to other comparable buildings, and so it usually is a very effective metric to use, and it is often used in many of our projects, as well as any LEED certified project. That terminology becomes very common, and it's part of the project.
Just to explain a little bit for those who aren't familiar how that works, it looks at the type of functionality of a specific building, and then you set the energy use intensity for that. So, you know, Chitani mentioned labs are some of the most energy use intensive. So there is a recognition that different functions have different expectations. And you kind of can come up with a target by blending the types of spaces that exist within your building. So the target that makes sense for your facility specifically, but also like Russ says, gives you a good way to compare, you know, is the energy use intensity of the labs I've designed, how is that performing in relation to other lab buildings in our climate zone, for example.
And topical, thank you, Lana. Topical, I just want to add one more. Dane County is currently hosting a recognition platform for folks to share their energy use intensity so that they can be recognized for being a leader. And I believe I saw it posted in the chat, but Kathy Kuntz at Dane County would be the person to speak to that and knows more about it.
So we have three questions that are actually somewhat intertwined. So the first one is wondering what resources or tools are available, or maybe the ones that you guys go to most, to assist in monetizing and quantifying the benefits of indoor environmental quality. And indoor environmental quality is kind of one of the return on investments, but there's also kind of overall, right? How can we really help show the importance of these investments for sustainability and health? So some people that might be on this call that are going to be, talking to their leadership, what would you guys recommend as a good place to start?
I think WELL certification has some really great metrics that relate directly to this. And the thing that I like a lot about WELL is it's research-based strategies. So whenever there's a recommendation about a certain metric of air quality, like reduction of contaminants and fresh air uses, there's research directly tied to it. Which studies said that this will have a positive impact on your house. So if you're looking for, like the question says, resources and tools to assist in, this is specifically more related to quantifying the benefits of indoor air quality. There are direct metrics related to what those strategies suggest.
I completely agree. The WELL program, there is a cost to it to actually gain the actual certification, but the material is free, and following the program is free. One other thing I would add, if just starting to engage your employees, engage your staff with surveys and asking folks how are you feeling? Now that's not scientific. That's subjective, but it's a start to have a dialogue.
Yes, post-occupancy evaluation is also becoming more and more frequent. So I think over time, we're going to have much better data sets that allow us to compare what a high-performance building or a building that has implemented some of these concepts might be perceived, as opposed to just a traditionally designed building. So.
Nice. All right, we're going to turn a little bit now to homeowners. What would be your main recommendation to homeowners with old houses that would want to reduce energy consumption?
Can I do this one? And I'll try not to geek out, because I'm actually really passionate about this, because I also live in an old house, if you can see in the background a little bit, built in 1925 and just leaking warm air through the roof constantly. There is a wonderful program called Focus on Energy that many of you may be aware of that offers incentives for home improvements. So the process is that you have an energy audit done by an independent third party. I already knew what I wanted done to my house, because of my profession, but that's part of receiving the incentives, is having that person come and validate your highest payoff for performance. For example, my husband said, wouldn't we replace all of the windows? But it turns out that air sealing and insulating the attic has a lot more benefit than improving window insulation. So the energy audit person comes, checks out your house, tells you, like, here's your highest improvements, and then when you get those done, you can submit for rebates, basically related to your improvements. And just sharing from my own experience, for those who have a house of this era, air sealing and insulating the attic is a huge impact thing that you can do. And I can tell you, it's the difference between waking up at 2 in the morning freezing and waking up at 2 in the morning warm, because the warm air is no longer leaking out through your roof. So Focus on Energy, I'm sorry, is the name of that program.
Especially with many of us at home more, it's good to think about, what is your home now like when you're there all day as well. So I have two more questions. One's a quick one. We had a comment earlier about how design can better transition into nature and back into the built environment. So, windows being able to open, outdoor spaces. We had, someone just, saying now how healthy they feel when they're in nature. And, do you guys have any projects you worked on, or any examples of where you think that might head in the design fields and the engineering fields to combine indoor and outdoor more?
I'll quickly jump in and say, the natural affinity we have towards natural environments, natural forms and processes is called biophilia, and it's a proven reaction, right? It's just that as humans, we inherently have a positive benefit from that relationship with our natural environment. So it's begun to become more recognized within the industry that this is a thing of value. You know, and I earlier in my career, I felt kind of like the hippie person, you know, trying to convince people that having nature and space was valuable. But now that there's so much resource behind it, it really kind of validates that part of the conversation. So there are a number of ways it could manifest, but I am excited about the idea that this conversation about the positive impacts of the relationship we have with nature is happening.
What about from the energy side, Russ? You know, is there
Well,
benefits there?
yeah, I would say recognizing the indoor air quality, the impact of indoor air quality, and the benefits of fresh air. That's definitely a topic that is getting more and more popular. So we are seeing a lot of requests and needs to find solutions for bringing in more fresh air to buildings, and so that's a connection to nature that you don't see, but is certainly there.
Yeah, I have a quick one, which is interesting. And again, it's another double-edged sword. This is access to views to the exterior, and then also incoming daylight is a big theme. But at the same time, when you look at performance measures, and now even the new sustainability guidelines from DFDM are mandating a certain percentage of window to wall ratio. So it's one of those balance point issues, and it kind of shows you how interesting high performance design can be, because it's not a one answer solves all. You really have to be contextual in how you approach your issue and address these problems. So.
That's right. All right, well, we are at the end of our program time. I want to thank you guys so much for this great conversation today. I think when we were prepping, we had talked about, you know, we were designing for the 100-year flood, we're designing for the 100-year pandemic. You know, as architects and engineers and facility managers, you know, what you're learning right now is helping us now and into the future create better built environment. And thank you all for your thoughts and what you do every day to help make that a supported and positive place in our community. I'd invite everyone to join us for networking who's available to spend a little more time. Love to hear your thoughts about the talk today. Maybe if Lucia, you could put the networking link into the chat box, and we look forward to seeing you at the summit. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.